Hello and welcome to Between the Hashes, the show where we take one college game each week and break it down a little bit. I'm your host, Matt Keim, coming from Los Angeles, California, and today we are going to be talking about, well, the game that everybody's talking about this week, Texas versus number 1, Alabama. The game is in Austin this Saturday afternoon. So this game is interesting for a few reasons. The first of which being is that Steve Sarkisian is going into his second year as Texas's coach, and he was a former member of Coach Nick Saban's offensive staff for the last few years at Alabama. And up until last year, Nick Saban had never lost to a former assistant. Never, not once. And then he lost twice in the same season to Jimbo Fisher and Kirby Smart, respectively. Can Steve Sarkisian make it 3? So I'm going to look at this from the Alabama side for a minute. Alabama is coming off of a season which Nick Saban has said was a bit of a rebuild, which is comical given the fact that they were one possession away, essentially, in the national title game. Late pick 6 sealed the deal for them. And they returned the best offensive and defensive players in the sport, in Bryce Young, the rating Heisman winner and one of the odds-on favorites to win it again this year. Will he? Probably not, but that's a different discussion. And Will Anderson Jr., a man who recorded 17 and a half sacks in 15 games last year. One of the most dominant defensive players we have seen in quite some time in this sport. The man is a top 10 draft pick, if not top 5. And he was part of an Alabama defense that sacked the quarterback 57 times. For a point of reference, that's about 4 sacks a game. And while Bryce Young does have some new faces at receiver, he is returning to lead the charge on an offense that averaged 39.9 points per game, and they showed no signs of slowing down in a 55-0 win over Utah State. Now, granted, it was Utah State, so with games like that, you really can't take too much conclusions away from the fact that they look competent once again. One of the interesting things about this game is that this is a rematch of the 2010 national title game, a game that gave Nick Saban his first of many championships at Alabama, and the game that kind of signified the end of the Mack Brown era at Texas. And since then, Texas is on its 4th coach. They have not won a single conference title in that span, which is the longest such stretch in program history. And Alabama has added 5 more national titles. Texas has been kind of in the woods. They've had moments where it looked like they were going to look competitive again, especially under Tom Herman, but it just never worked out for one reason or another. Steve Sarkisian is hoping to reverse that trend, and so far the recruiting results have paid off. Texas has averaged at least a top 20 recruiting class for the last 3 years. Sarkisian's first class was 15th. This year it was 5th, and they're on pace for a top 5 class going into 2023. We'll see how that shakes out, but the recruiting is there, the talent is there. And we have a new face as Texas's quarterback. Since Casey Thompson transferred over to Nebraska, we have Quinn Ewers, who came in from Ohio State. He's one of the most hyped quarterback prospects we have seen in a long time. There's only a handful of other guys who are ever rated that highly by the composite websites, the most recent of which at that position was Trevor Lawrence. So that is the type of hype this guy was getting coming out of high school, and people kind of forgot about that because he was just on the bench all year last year. But this guy should be very, very good. And Texas is recruiting and transferring in at a high level, but is it enough against a team that sacked the quarterback almost 60 times last year? Now, Texas's offensive stats were a little bit uneven last year. They gave up 26 sacks last year at an average of a little under 2.5 sacks given up a game, and their offensive line has gotten younger. They're starting 2 true freshman tackles, and in the 2 deep, they have 8 true freshmen, and then if you include Quinn Ewers as a redshirt freshman, 9 total on their offensive 2 deep. So they're all really talented, and they all have very, very high NFL potential. But I truly do not think it's going to be enough against Alabama. I think Alabama wins. I think Alabama covers, and I don't think it's that competitive a game. The caveat there is that I want to see how long Quinn Ewers can keep Texas in it. Can they be competitive in the first half? Can they be competitive after those first few series once the energy in the crowd settles down a little bit? Can they keep it going into halftime? Can they come out of halftime strong? I think they might be a little too young in the moment, a little too big, and Texas is just too soon into its rebuild to truly be competitive in this kind of a game, but it will be a very big benchmark for Steve Sarkisian's squad. So I'm introducing a new segment this week. It's called the Lightning Round, in which I pick a few other games that jumped out to my eye this week. We have a couple other ranked matchups this week. We have Kentucky versus Florida. Can Florida continue their momentum off of a top 10 upset against Utah, or can Kentucky build off of their win against Florida last year? I kind of lean Kentucky here, even though Florida's favored, but I could see this one going either way. BYU against Baylor. BYU has a very experienced quarterback. Baylor's starting someone relatively new, and the game is in Provo, Utah, but I think Baylor walks away with a slight upset. USC versus Stanford. One of the first real tests for Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams. Can they go against a team that's going to be way more physical and way more competitive than Rice? I think USC wins. I think they cover, and I think that they start to build a little bit of momentum as they head into Pac-12 play. Another game that jumped out to me, and this is going to be my underrated game of the week, is Houston against Texas Tech. Now, this is a rematch from last year in which Texas Tech won by multiple scores over Houston, but the Houston team that started last year is not the Houston team that finished last year. Houston had a very strong season, and they were inches away from winning the American title against a Cincinnati team that sent several people to the NFL and made a playoff spot. The first ever G5 team to do so. I like Houston a lot this year, even though they're 3-point underdogs on the road. Daniel Holgerson actually has quite a bit of familiarity with Texas Tech, having coached there during the Mike Leach years and from his time as West Virginia's head coach in the Big 12. And he has a 5-3 record coaching against Texas Tech. I think they go in, and I think Houston's much more experienced squad and coaching staff, and I think they get the win, and I think they get the upset. A lot of upsets this week, guys. Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time, guys. We have a lot of great content on Empire. That's AMPIRE Media on YouTube. Hit that bell, like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. You're on YouTube. It's been around long enough. And we have other great podcasts. The John Keim Report, in which you can get weekly updates on the Washington Commanders as they head into the NFL season. We have, with hockey season right around the corner, we have All's Caps, hosted by former Capitals defenseman Carl Alsner and AP hockey writer Steve Wino. We have all that and more on Empire Media on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again, guys, and enjoy the games.